Welcome to the ABCs of Horses, a Big Blend radio podcast featuring Christy Wood, a world champion horse trainer, a carded horse show judge, an equestrian expert, and an author. Welcome, everyone. Today it's all about to lunge or not to lunge. Christy Wood is back here, world champion horse trainer, and we are going to talk about lunging. It is L. We are on the ABCs of Horses, and we got to the L word. My gosh, I like the L word. Welcome back, Christy. How are you?
I'm fine, Lisa. I'm ready to get started today.
I'm excited about lunging because I think we've touched on it on a lot of the episodes. And I never understood what it was about until I started doing it with the horses. And lunging to me was I understand there's tricks and there's so much that goes into it, what we're going to talk about today. But my biggest thing to me was it taught me about being entirely focused, not losing your focus with your horse, and having like intense communication. That was like you're in this bubble almost. So can you know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
You're in the zone. You're in, here you are in a ring and the horse is going around and you're telling it what to do here, there, and everywhere. But if you answer your phone while you're lunging, you've lost it.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah.
Right. So, can you tell everybody what lunging is?
Lunging in itself is like the classroom, just like riding in the arena. We need to have some focus to be able to communicate with our horse, to teach it what we want to teach that day. And it should be the same way with lunging. And lunging is actually something that we do early on with even younger horses that we're starting to break. So we get their focus, we get them listening to us, learning our body reactions, our body, how we place our body in communicating with the horse. And I'll explain that in just a moment. But it's just a great tool to have in your horse toolbox as a trainer and as an equestrian for many reasons. So why don't we talk about the why we do this? Okay. So we do this. Okay. So we do lunge mainly for exercise, but we can break that exercise down. So we lunge because we may have a horse that has been, let's say we just haven't ridden in a few weeks because of weather, which we're experiencing right now, some unusual weather in California. So horses are going to sit for a while. Some of them will be stalled. Even if they're out in paddocks, they're going to find shelter to get out of the rain, and they're not going to move around a lot. So if your horse has been sitting for a while, it's a great way to do horse calisthenics. And so you want to give them a chance to warm up. So when you go to the gym to warm up, you don't start by running your mile. You stretch your legs and you may lift a few weights, and you're going to exercise to breathe heavily and get your cardio going. So this is also applied to horses. Give them a chance to stretch their muscles, start to move, feel good about moving. Maybe the muscles are a little tight, or it's also a way to read your horse's energy. And we talked about that before in the letter E. Horses are going to have a lot of energy that they've stored up because they haven't been moving. And of course, you're still feeding them very well. So they're going to store up some energy. So it's a great way to start your horse out before you start to ride, even to exercise them and give them a chance to get rid of some of that energy, of course. And we talked about the energy session with reading the barometer of a horse's higher head, a tail that might be higher. They're snorting, they're moving quickly. So there's just a lot of energy there that obviously we need to let them get rid of before we get on their backs and start to ride. So it's exercise. And then pretty much the same thing, exercise / warm up. It's a good way to get your horses warmed up before you start riding, because we don't want any injuries either. So again, you think you've been sitting for a week behind the desk Monday through Friday, and then all of a sudden you want to go out and ride 5 miles on your bicycle on Saturday, and your muscles are going to start feeling that unless you do a little bit of warm up in between, or try to do a mile for an hour and then take a break and then maybe do another mile. You have to make sure you protect yourself and your horse, talking about your horses now, from some injuries. So go ahead.
But you're gonna, because I want people that are new to this to understand what this is an exercise, right? And there's communication, there's all of this going on, but you are in a circle. So I want people to be able to visualize what you're talking about. So
Right.
typically, you're standing in the center of a ring and you have what I always just like they have a bridle on. I don't know what's going on with that part. I
No,
can't
no.
remember.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
No, no, it's
All right.
okay. That's okay. So
This is
I
why
still
you're
have,
on the show and not me.
okay,
I'm
well, I still,
asking the questions.
okay, well, let me go back to again why we're doing this. Let me go to my bullet points of why we're doing this, and then I'll go into how we do it and the equipment that we need. How's that?
Good, good.
So I'm going to go back into the injured horse. Hopefully we don't have any injured horses. We're getting them back in shape. The other reason we lunge a horse is a horse that is coming back from possibly an injury. So
Mm.
instead of riding your horse, you put them on the lunge line. You can control their gaits if they need to walk or they just need to trot and they're not ready to lope or canter. You can control their
Mm.
gaits for a horse that's coming back as like a rehab, to
Yeah,
slowly control that. Because if you don't control it, the horse again could create an injury by straining a leg or something like
but you're
that.
going in a circle.
We're
That's
going
that's
in
what
a
I'm trying
circle,
to tell
right?
people.
So right.
So we'll
So
get into the equipment, but that's what I'm saying. You're in the center and you're directing your horse in a circle and getting
right.
to and working with them to go to a specific gait. And this is what about, pregnant mares? What
Same
happens?
thing. If you have a mare, you can now if you've been riding this mare that's a champion show horse or a really excellent trail horse, you can still ride a horse. You just have to be careful that you don't do it to the extremes. So yes, in
Oh,
the
wow.
last trimester, that's when you start paying a little more attention. She's definitely going to be heavier carrying that foal. So yes, if she's uncomfortable, and you definitely don't want to climb some serious mountains, but you just want to get her out and you've got a short day, let's say from work, and you can't get her out on the trail for a nice walk or a nice little jog somewhere. Yes, we can lunge these horses to keep mares in shape. So let me just finish the last thing. We also use
Hmm.
lunging for braking. So early on, we're going to train these horses to carry a saddle, to be comfortable with the saddle on the lunge line, because there is going to be some exuberance, there is going to be some unknown to the horse of what this foreign object is on their back. It's better to do this in a controlled situation by lunging
Mm.
this horse to make sure, again, we control their gaits, to get them comfortable and realize that this isn't a threat. So we do this to break horses. And so that's when we're talking about now how we're doing this. And we are doing this in either a round corral that some people have that's enclosed to start training young horses. We use round corrals to keep them focused on the handler. You can also, if they're learning to be proficient about lunging, you can lunge them anywhere in an open arena, just keeping them, of course, in that circle. And so we'll talk about our equipment. Our equipment is a lunge line. It is about 30 feet long, anywhere from 30 to 40 feet long. They come either in cotton or webbing or nylon. And the first thing off the bat is I'm going to have a big NO in front of nylon.
Oh,
Nylon is it gives a little too much. It slips through your hands. Even wearing gloves, it
yeah.
will slip through your hand. So it's
Yeah,
a
it's
little more
true.
dangerous. It's uncomfortable. You don't want a rope burn from that. So the cotton is really
That
the
hurts.
best. Or webbing. I personally use webbing, the web
Hmm.
lunge lines, because I have small hands. I'm a small woman. And so sometimes the cotton lunge lines are round and thick, almost thicker than a lead rope. And I have a hard time holding on to that. So we have a lunge line that's 30 to 40 feet. And when you start lunging a horse, you won't send them out that far in the beginning. You keep them a little closer to you so they learn again the language you're going to use, your verbal commands, along with your body position and a little bit of pressure from this line to teach the words that you're going to be using if you're a person like I am that uses verbal commands, because this is going to transfer over to when you're riding them.
Mm. So the equipment is a big deal because if you are uncomfortable, your horse is going to sense that and you're not going to have a good session, right? I always feel
Yes.
that. I feel like you've got to be in the human has to be in their zone too. I just always feel like animals pick up if you're not in your zone and you're
Well,
not
it's the
focused or
same
you.
thing as riding. That's right. And
Mhm.
lunging. You're teaching this horse. This is the very first time you lunge a horse could be when they're as a weanling or even a yearling. So you're going to teach them. The very first thing you want to teach them is to go forward. and then to
Mm-hmm.
stop. That stop is real important. That's
Yeah.
going to go through the rest of their life. So if you use verbal commands, and of course, well, let's get back to holding that lunge line, by the way.
Yeah.
That lunge line should be held with very large loops in the hand that's going in the direction of the horses that's going. So let's say we're lunging in a circle to the left. The lunge line should be held, in your left hand when you're lunging to the left. If you lunge to the right, the lunge line should be in your right hand. Your
Mm-hmm.
other hand then is going to be holding a lunge whip. And the lunge whip should be a 6-foot lunge whip that has a 6-foot lash. So some people want to use the short little loading whips that are maybe 3 or 4 foot high with a little, maybe a foot, even less than a foot, 6 or 8 inches at the end. And they use those for helping just to tap a horse to try to teach them to go into a trailer. They're really very useless when it comes to lunging a horse, because the idea of the lunge whip is to be an extension of your hand.
Not a
And
whip.
it's
Not a,
not to be used as the word whip sounds like, just like we talked about kicking last month. We don't
yeah.
want to kick our horse with the toe of our boot. We kick with the side of our leg when we're riding them astride. So the
Mm.
lunge whip is there to encourage a horse to go forward. And if you don't have that extension from your arm, then there's a gap there that horse will not respect or understand in order to go forward. So it's just a matter of extending that whip out away from your body and closing the gap behind the horse. When they see that, it encourages them to go forward. That's all there is to it.
You're tickling the buttski, you know.
If you need to, you can you can rub it lightly. That's why we keep the lunge. That's why we keep them close. In the beginning, our circle is only going to be maybe 10 feet or 5 feet.
Oh,
So they understand not to fear the whip. That's very important. That whip is not there to incite fear.
it's not a weapon. Yeah.
No, it's there to encourage. And
Mm.
then your left hand has your hand on the lunge line, controlling the horse going forward. Now, let's talk about our body position, because that's real important when we go on to teaching a horse to stop. Even before we teach the stop, you've got to teach them to go forward. So if you're standing in the middle of we'll say a 10-foot circle, and you have your lunge line attached to your horse's halter. Now let's break that down a little bit as well. I prefer to use regular nylon halters that are constructed with the squares and the rings on the side of the nose. It's got a throat latch. It's got a buckle over the horse's crown, behind the ears, and buckles. It's stronger and it stays in position to lunge a horse better than a rope halter. A
Mm.
rope halter is very thin and it will slide. So when your horse starts to pull away from you, or it isn't quite disciplined to stay in that round circle, those rope halters can slide, and then all of a sudden it's up in the horse's near side, which would be the left side if we're going to the left, and get in the horse's eye. And they can slip out of that so quickly. They're just thin. They don't have enough
Yeah.
support on the horse's head for communicating what you want. So
Mm.
I use regular nylon or even leather halters that are shaped for the horse's head. And then we're going to need a little bit of help with pressure to make the horse understand what we're trying to teach. And so
This goes back to the kicking. Pressure, it's like a nudge. It's like, hello, this is what I'm trying to tell you. So pressure is a huge part of communication, it seems.
it is. So the pressure we use when we ride a horse, if we ride a horse in a shank bit, has a chin strap that goes underneath the horse's chin. And when you softly pull back on your reins, besides saying the word ho and sitting back and using your seat, there's going to be pressure on the horse's mouth a little bit with the bit on the bars, but there's also a little bit of pressure under the chin. So all of those elements, I call them aids, that aid you in communicating with the horse to stop are all pressure points. Your seat, the chin strap, pulling back on the reins, and of course the verbal command. So obviously now we're not riding the horse, we're lunging and exercising the horse from the ground. We need some pressure to help make that point. So there's several things you can do. You can take that cotton or webbed lunge line, you can put it through the ring of the halter on the near side and clip it on the other side of the horse's nose and put it underneath the chin. So you could give a little tug and they might feel that and respond to the word ho that we're going to teach them to do, or the other gaits that we're going to teach. You could take that same lunge line, put it through the ring near the horse's nose on the near side, go up over the crown, behind the ears, and snap it on the other side. So now you have some pressure up above the horse's head a little bit, still coming out to the side. And And then the last one is we call it a stud chain, and the stud chain was designed to control stallions to make sure that they behave. And the chain is just the same as the chain on your chin strap if you use a chin strap for your bit. And it's there to apply some pressure to get the horse's attention. So some people kind of cringe and thinking you might be using a stud chain, but of course, anything that you have can be used incorrectly, can apply a little more pressure than you need to. And so you've got to have some sense, horse sense, or human sense to be smart enough not to overdo that. But we're talking about, I'm a lady that weighs 100 pounds and I'm lunging a horse that's 1,400 pounds. And, sometimes, of course, I get lucky raising my own horses and training them so they come up the ranks, but being weanlings, yearlings, they learn the pressure. It's just fine. If someone brings me a horse that's 1,400 pounds, it's a 2-year-old that hasn't been handled yet, I'm going to need a little bit of leverage to make the horse understand what I'm asking.
You're serious. Yeah, this is serious.
So, and it's also a way of preventing me from getting drug. I don't want to have a wreck with that horse either. So I just tap on that little stud chain under its chin. I don't put it over the nose, but some people do like to put the chain or the lunge line over the nose instead. So I'm giving you several options. It's whatever works to get the correct response.
Yeah, because again, we go into safety, and communication is about safety and having the same language, right? So that safety occurs. This goes, I know I always bring this back to dogs, but it does. Walking dogs is a big deal. And you just like you take your horse out, you could take your horse out on a trail and somebody brings another horse out on the trail that your horse says, I don't like it. Or their horse does something, or maybe they get spooked by a coyote or, whatever happens. I know you do a lot of trail riding, especially on the Chief Joe Trail, with the progressive ride that you do every year. But like walking dogs, I walk dogs that I don't know in neighborhoods I don't know. And I'm adamant about actually not walking the dog unless it's to go to the bathroom until I actually spend the evening or the day or some hours with them getting to know them. So we have a communication because I don't, I'm not their parent and they know and they're going to mess with you because you're like the babysitter. As a pet sitter, this is what happens. And so what you are walking a dog with is crucial. It is crucial. I've walked dogs that can get out of their leash and their collar within a second, and we're in trouble. But I've gotten through it because I have established communication. I've done a walk once where this guy actually set his dogs on our dog, the dogs I'm walking. Like once in a while in places in cities, people don't tend to put their dogs on a leash like they're supposed to. You're in a leash area, and some people are just idiots. Like I'm just going to say it straight. And if you don't establish that communication, I have been known to walk a dog around a house and their backyard in their leash until we walk outside. I won't do it. I'm that conscious about it because if you do not establish that communication, so I suppose I've been lunging dogs because I do that. I walk them and I will not walk them together if there's more than one dog until because they become a pack when you go out. As one person walking a dog, you just, I just met these dogs. Let's take them all on a walk, and you don't know the neighborhood. I always try to go with the owners, beforehand with a walk. So they already know they know the intel from my mom and dad. So I kind of look at it that way.
We're dealing with a 1,200-pound horse as well.
Yeah. So. And I'm talking dogs, but also with their leash and their collars. There's collars that have those studs and things that people think are really inhumane. They're inhumane if you do not use them correctly. And that's the same with the horse. If you don't if you use these wrong, then you're being mean. Don't be mean. Just use them like the pressure, like you're talking about. I think it's so cool that we're talking about this because I think lunging is like a dance. It's magic when it works, when you work at it. So my point, I wanted to ask you about this because lunging is communication and training, right?
Yes.
And I would think that as a horse parent or horse owner, anybody doing the lunging, do you keep like a journal of what you're doing? Film it maybe even on your iPhone or whatever, your smartphone, so that you don't just go, we're lunging and move on and then lunge again and don't remember what you did the last week? Or do you keep a document of how things went the last time, what needs to be worked on more, that kind of thing?
Well, I might write that down for owners that bring horses to me to be trained, but I don't do that with my own because I just file it in my head. So I know the progression of what I need to do. Uh, I know what I'd like to try to accomplish that day. Sometimes you don't get that done, and sometimes you do, and it's just the rewards are just so beneficial. The idea of the pressure from this lunge line again is to have a harmonious time with your horse, but a true understanding of what each other is saying. And so we need
Mm.
also that respect from the horse to say, yes, thank you. I know what you're saying. I can do this for you. And this is the early training. That's why we train these young horses even before they're 2 years of age. They're being lunged, they're learning the verbal commands, and they're learning how to carry a saddle. And that's where it all starts. So let me go back to the position of lunging because this is
Mm.
important. Not everybody's going to understand this until I sort of draw a picture. So let's say our horse is standing still. And by the way, my horse is standing parallel to me. So that's kind of important to me in the way that I lunge is I don't want a horse standing facing me. If he's facing me, I've lost control over his hind end. I've lost control of the direction that horse needs to travel for me. So I need them standing parallel to me. So there are some people that don't lunge that way. They prefer that when the horse stops, they automatically turn and face, and maybe they walk into them. I prefer that my horses are disciplined enough to understand the word ho for stopping, and they stop parallel, and they don't move again until either I move my position or say a word or give them a cluck. So I don't want them coming in and turning and facing because I need to have control over the hind end. So right now my horse is standing still. I've got the lunge line in my left hand because we're going to track to the left. The lunge whip is in my right hand. And I actually become, if you draw a triangle, the horse is the
Mm-hmm.
bottom of the triangle, and then both points come up through my arms in my direction to me. I'm at the point. I'm at the tip of this triangle. Now, if I'm standing at the horse's girth or at the shoulder, that's going to be the center of my triangle. If I want my horse to go forward, I'm going to step back towards his hind end and slightly raise my whip, cluck, and ask that horse to walk. And that horse is usually going to walk forward. So they're seeing my body position go towards their rear, not walking into them, but staying parallel with them, 10 feet
Mm-hmm.
away. I'm going to
Okay.
raise that whip, cluck, tell them to walk, and they're going to walk forward. So my left hand holding the lunge whip is just going to ensure that they stay in the 10-foot circle. So I don't want them walking too far away from me. If they do, I'm going to lightly give them that tug. They're going to come back into the circle. If they come in too close and come into my space, I'll take actually that lunge whip and put it in front of me and lightly tap them maybe on the shoulder or the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell them to move out. I'll use the word out so they move away from me. And then the idea is just to keep them perfectly centered on this 10-foot circle. Now, I've stepped back to their flank. That's where the hip comes back into the end of the rib cage. And that's the driving point of where your horse needs to go forward. So if I'm standing back at
Okay.
that flank, that horse already knows he needs to move forward because I'm asking him to by my body position, the encouragement of the little bit of a wiggle of the whip, and my verbal command. So now I've got a horse that's walking, and I'm telling him to walk, walk, walk. I can say their name, good girl, walk, and add a little cluck. And then when I'm ready to stop, I'm going to change my body position, again, parallel, not walking into the horse, but staying parallel, 10 feet away. And I'm going to step forward of the shoulder and tell them ho. So that's the
Mm.
stopping position right there, is that shoulder. If I step forward of that shoulder, they're to stop. So they're learning to stop because I've said the verbal command. My body position has changed to come up in front. And at this point, I can either use a light tap on the line or the stud chain or the line going over the head or over the nose. At the same time, I say ho. And remember, I said I'm keeping this circle
Mm-hmm.
small. So sometimes
Yeah.
horses won't understand, but you have to apply different pressures at the same time. So I'm going to use my body and forward of the shoulder to say ho, lightly tap on the line to say ho, and I'm going to take the end of my lunge whip and slide my hand back towards the lash and take the handle part and walk up close enough to them that I place it in front of their chest. So I've given them now a physical barrier for stopping. And I tell you what, it only takes 1 or 2 times to do that, and the horse understands what ho is. So it's not just one thing, it's multiple things. That's why we have, like I say, we have 4 aids that aid us in communicating with horses when we ride, our voice, seat, legs, and hands. Well, now on the ground, I've got the lunge line pressure, I've got my body position, I've got the verbal command, and the handle of that whip puts pressure on that chest, and that horse, 2 or 3 times, it only takes 2 or 3 times, that horse will understand what I want. And then you can test yourself. The fun part is, don't say anything. You don't have to say walk. Step back towards the flank, slightly raise the whip, give her a cluck, and your horse is going to walk off. But of course, I always want to encourage and teach the verbal commands. And then the same thing applies when you're ready to stop. Don't say anything, but walk forward of that shoulder, say the word ho, and see what happens. If they don't stop, light little tap on the lunge line, then maybe the handle of the lunge whip.
Well, Christy, you've given a whole new meaning to the word ho.
But Lisa, that's the most important word, right? I mean,
I know,
but I guarantee
you're walking around saying
ho,
and everyone's going to go, Christy, I thought you were such a sweet, little lady.
Yeah, well, I'm still a little lady with all my limbs because my horses stop. That's what ho means. It means stop all the motion. Now, what I do on top of all that, if my horse does a really great job with that, by the way, when we're doing this, it's important that you understand how you use your whip. You've got to be conscious of the fact that you're holding the whip when the horse is walking forward, where the handle is, and the whip tip, where the lash attaches to it, should really pretty much be held down unless you need to encourage your horse to walk forward. Then you raise it up just a little and just wiggle it so they see that. It's an encouragement. If my hand was long enough, I'd be taking my fingers and lightly tapping them on the buttocks near their tail and say, please walk. But my hands aren't obviously long enough.
Yeah.
So I use the lunge whip. But when you're asking the horse to stop, make sure the point of that whip is down on the ground. Don't raise it up above your head. Don't lose track of what you're doing with that whip because you're going to contradict yourself. Your body position,
good point.
Hand on the lunge line taps and you say the verbal command a ho. What's happening with the tip of your whip? Pay attention. It's not to be up in the air. It's to be down because they'll read that whip really quickly. If that's up in the air, they'll think, oh, I still need to go.
Yeah. And then you're going to go, no, you didn't do what I said, but yeah.
It's human error when that happens, then if the whip is down. So then what my horse does well, I'm going to drop that whip on the ground. I'm going to gather up my lunge line as I walk towards my horse. And I train with a lot of praise. I am rubbing that horse's neck and I'm praising them and my voice is upbeat and going, good girl, you just did great. You ho, really good. That was a great ho. I mean, I'll repeat it and pet and pet. My horses really respond well to that.
I think so. That's how we did our horses. It was always like, here's a carrot,
Yeah.
I mean, we had the rescues, as as we've talked on the show, and it was always about that. And lunging to me was really about getting to know them. That's why I say it's the same. I bring it to the dog side especially for people who are completely new to horses. I mean, you may just be beginning. So I'm trying to bring it to the level of someone who has no clue about horses yet,
So Lisa,
that's listening to the show.
Yeah. So let me elaborate a little bit more about the equipment and what you do with your equipment also while you're doing this. So you need to always have your lunge line held and picked up in your hand. The line should never be on the ground between you and your horse.
Dangerous.
It should never be that long. And you should always have your bigger loops, not tight loops wrapped around your fingers, but big, probably 1.5 feet, 18 inches, big loops that you have 2 or 3 big loops that are loose in your hand to control your horse. You never, ever lunge a horse with that rope on the ground. And I'm telling you this.
I've seen that happen. And that's where that's a danger.
It's a danger. And I'm telling you from a personal experience, I wasn't there that day, but 20 minutes after I left a campground with some friends of mine, my friend decided to lunge her horse with that lunge line down on the ground, and the horse spooked and took off, and she's no longer with us. So it's a very, very
Oh,
dangerous, it's a
oh.
very, very dangerous thing. You have to keep that line up and ready to control your horse. Now, if something happens and you get a little afraid and the horse bolts or the horse wants to run, and that's again, you have to sort of pick your battles. If a horse has that much energy, let them run for a minute as long as you're controlling that run. I would let them
Mm.
bolt on there. I would slow them down to a trot, then ask them to pick up a canter. If they want to go a little faster, then let them. But you've got to keep that line picked up. And if all of a sudden you have to grab that line with two hands, remember you've got that whip in your right hand or the other hand that is not holding the lunge line. Just drop it on the ground. Use both hands on the lunge line if you need to. Don't hang on to that whip and try to gather your line at the same time if that whip is going to wiggle around because you're just going to make your horse go faster. It's
Mm.
very important you know what you're doing with your equipment.
I really, really agreed. It's the same thing as knowing not to, like, if you're going to fall off the horse, don't try to hold on half the time. You know what I mean? There's this decision you have to make when you're falling of if you stay on, you could actually be dragged and really hurt. Don't hold on to the reins kind of thing. And Nancy's middle finger, sorry, it's true, her right middle finger, which she loves her middle finger, Christy, that is crooked and bent and buckled because of her holding on to the reins when she got bucked off from my horse, Cinnabar, and she got dragged. And her body hurt, I mean, she broke her finger, and it's all messed up to this day because she didn't just go, oh, I'm going, let go. And so the equipment thing and understanding your equipment is a big deal. So is there something people can do when they're first starting this? I mean, is this, let me go to the beginner because I always think this is so important because I know we have a lot of beginners listening. When you do lunging for the first time, should you have a trainer like yourself be there, be with you? Is there education on lunging so that
Yes.
you go in there confident? Because I know horses smell when you're not confident.
You
They
really
know it.
should. You really should. I give lessons in lunging, and you really should learn from somebody that does it very well and take a few lessons and get comfortable with that with your horse and learn how to do it properly. It's really very wise. It's the only safe thing to do is truly to learn from somebody that already knows how to do it well. No doubt about it.
Yeah. And so that you can actually see what you're doing with the equipment. And, I love that you bring that up now. When we do these podcasts, Christy sends me this, like, here's what we're talking about because I'm clueless, right? I've got a little bit of knowledge, but that little bit is dangerous, as you can hear on these shows. But you did bring up this one point in your notes that says free lunging. Like, what is that? Free bird? I'm going to cue in, Leonard Skinner here, but,
okay. Well, some
is this,
people,
what is this? What
some
is
people
that?
like to free lunge. Now you can free lunge, which means remember I talked about the round corral in the beginning. There are many places that have a 40-foot circled enclosed corral that's round. That's why we call it a round corral. And some people will take their horses in there, stand in the center with the whip and take the halter even off and no lunge line and just exercise their horse or pretty much just chase their horse around. Now that's fine if your horse already is fairly well broke and you're doing it for exercise or a warm up. That's fine. You can walk, trot, and canter if your horse has really learned how to lunge just off of verbal commands. And that's actually the ultimate test is you don't have to have a lunge line on your horse and you can go through those maneuvers out there in the round corral without the line, which is called free lunging. And you can step forward to the shoulder. The horse will stop. You can even reverse them. I can get my horses to do rollbacks, which is a reining maneuver on their hind end and go back the other direction. That is fine if your horse is really broke. If you're trying to break a young horse, I wouldn't suggest to do that because you haven't taught them the discipline of listening to the verbal commands, listening to your body language, and not fearing. So unfortunately, people get out there and they crack that whip really hard and they just make that horse run and run and run. And they're running because they're fearful. That's not,
That's not cool.
It's not designed for that. So, but if your horse is very well broke and yes, you want them to move and you want them to exercise, it's okay to free lunge. You can even do that in an arena. You don't have to even have a round corral. If you have a fully enclosed arena that's safe, where the horse can't jump out over a 2-foot rail, the rail's at least 4 feet or 5 feet high, and the gates are secure, let your horse run free in the arena. Let them run and play and do flying lead changes and buck and toot and fart. Just have a really good time and get that energy out. But obviously don't chase them so much that you chase them through the fence. You're just doing it to free lunge and let them exercise. And then if that, I've turned my horses loose before because my arena's larger and they can have a little more freedom. And these are my horses that are already world champions and the horse I ride on, the Chief Joe. And so they're broke. But when I'm done, I can actually stand in the middle of the arena and just hold on to the whip and cluck to them and they can go play and have a good time. When I'm done, that whip is dropped to the ground. I walk slowly up to them with the halter in my hand. My hand is extended and they know again that I'm coming up, and I'm coming up in a very peaceful tone, a very slow tone, and a very relaxed tone. So I would never fool my horse and come up to them being that slow with my hand held out and then try to chase them off all of a sudden. That's not building the rapport that I want. So you have it.
No.
I have mannerisms that tells them I'm done. And I keep asking them, I'm kind of curious, hey, Buckley, are you done now? And he'll look at me. And most of my horses will walk up to me knowing I have the halter and I'm calm and all the play is now over. And they go, oh, okay, we're ready. Let's go. Put the halter on. Let's go get saddled up and let's go ride.
So this really is, everything is about communication.
Yes.
And having that. I think that's so important because external things can happen no matter what you're doing. You could be in the lunging, arena. You could be on your horse on a trail. You could be on your horse in your arena. You could be, like cleaning the shoes out, the hoofs. You could be doing any of that, and something external happens. And if you don't have that communication, that's where danger occurs.
Well, it's communication, but it's also discipline. It's also respect. Well, they all go
discipline
together.
And respect.
They all go together.
Yeah, but it's respectful. I think when the humans take time to do these exercises like lunging, you're giving respect to the horse and you're creating respect for yourself. It's a mutual respect. And that's what happens and that's why I feel like lunging should be something consistent. So I wanted to ask you about that because animals like routine. They want to know, oh, we're going to do this again. Oh, okay. If it's sporadic and you only lunge once every 6 months, is there a point? So let's look at that consistency.
Yeah, you need to lunge when there's a need for it. So your well-broke horse doesn't need to be lunged all the time. It depends on if that, again, it's a matter of controlling energy, especially in the winter like this. Again, the horses have been sitting a long time. They're storing energy. So it really gives them a chance to allow them to play on the lunge line. Let them kick up their heels.
And fart, like you said.
Yeah,
they like to fart. They do.
But they're still staying in the circle, and that's okay. Let them do all that because that's something you don't want to ride. So let them do that on the lunge line, and then you've got their focus. And that's another reason we lunge. If you have an emergency situation, when you're on the ground with anything, if you step forward to that horse and you tap on that lunge line, you tell them, ho, what's going to happen when your horse spooks? You're talking about all of a sudden something suddenly happens and your horse spooks from a herd of deer that are going across the road. When you step forward towards that horse's shoulder and tell them, ho, you're going to switch their brain from being afraid of the 10 deer that are crossing the road or something that spooked them. They're going to switch back to, oh, my handler's in front of me. He just said, ho, his body position there. I'm going to stop. You can override a lot of that because of the training that you've done. You've done your homework. You've laid the foundation and you can stop a horse. And literally that happened one time on the Chief Joe ride. I'll tell you about this real quick is a man came through camp driving way too fast with a camper trailer. You don't drive that fast through a camp with 150 horses tied to trailers. He came and it was a very loud, I think he'd lost his muffler or something on one of the roads. And he came through camp and literally spooked my horse who was tied to my trailer with his hay bag. And because we hadn't had the time to set out the high ties yet and everything, and he was eating his lunch, and it frightened him. And he pulled back on that bolt that's attached to my horse trailer, and he pulled the bolt off with the hay bag, and now he's fearful. Now the hay bag's coming at his face. He's afraid of the man with the noisy truck. And my horse took off, and about 30 feet in front of him was a barbed wire fence. because we were in a
Oh,
pasture. We were parked up alongside a pasture out in the middle of nowhere for some cows. And I told Buckley, I yelled at him, I said, Buckley, ho. And I just used the deepest ho in my voice that I could, even though I couldn't change my body position because I was behind him. But I said those words, ho, and I said his name, and that horse stopped. So he stopped,
wow.
but short of that barbed wire fence, of getting caught in that barbed wire fence, and that hay bag still attached to him, which is making him even more fearful. And he stopped. And he turned around and looked at me like, Mom, I know you said ho. That means I got to stop. Did I do okay?
Aw,
And the look on his face was just amazing. I said, Buckley, you couldn't have done it any better. Good boy. Of
aw.
course, when I got back home to California, I took my trailer back into the man that does all the great work on my trucks and trailers. I said, you need a double bolt. You need to double
Yeah.
bolt this bolt.
But
And
I
it's
want to know
attached to
what
my
you did to
trailer.
I
Yeah,
want to know what you did to the guy with the truck.
well, I didn't have to worry about other people. Other people took care of him. He
Yeah,
got scolded big time. But
yeah,
anyway,
I
we
bet.
put in extra bolts and reinforced with diamond plate back there where that
But
U-bolt had
that's
come
the
off that
point.
horse trailer.
That's the point is like lunging and communication is so big. And it shouldn't, I've heard people like go like, oh, well, this horse is didn't, I'm going to lunge them and almost talk like it's a punishment and it shouldn't be. It's like, hey,
Oh
let's get
no.
in. It's a regrouping. It's a,
Oh,
communication lesson. You know what I mean? And I remember that of people going, oh, I got to lunge to this boy. You like, kind of like, it's not, there's just that mutual respect you talked about, I think is so beautiful and so important because, like you say, I mean, if a horse wants to run you over, it will. Even a deer will do that to
be a
you.
frightened. So you don't have to
Yeah.
lunge you don't have to lunge all the time. Once my horses are warmed up and they've been ridden regularly or even 2 or 3 days a week, they don't need that lunging anymore. But you've got, again, go back to the letter E on our ABCs of horses.
Hmm.
And we talked about energy. You have to learn to read your horse's energy. If you take him out of the stall and he's dancing around and flying around like a kite, I think you should probably lunge him. You
Well,
know,
do you think it helps, like, if your horse has colic, that they know the lunging
that's different.
routine?
No,
When
if
you're
they're
walking them, it's separate.
it's
I'm gonna
walking a
ask
step,
these
your
questions.
hand walking that horse. You're not going to put him out on the lunge line because he's going to try to lie down. If he has serious colic,
Oh,
he's going to
that's
try to
right.
lie
Yeah.
down. You need to be hand walking to make sure he can't. So no, you're not going to do more than a walk. You're not going to put that horse under any strain of
Okay.
trying to trot. No. So we don't use
I'm
lunging.
glad I'm glad I asked that because
Yeah.
you never know.
Yeah.
People go, "Oh, we'll just do this." So,
So there's
uh,
one other thing
wow.
before we close. I really
Yeah.
want to just let everybody definitely take a lesson from somebody that knows how to lunge to help you be successful in this. But there is a key to lunging. Now, when you're in the center of that circle and your horse is going around you, you need to focus on the horse's head, look at their eyes, and look at their ears. My eyes also go down to their legs to make sure they're moving correctly. They're not, lame or have any problems down there. If you look past the horse and try to look at the topography behind you, to look at the trees,
Hmm.
to look at the mountain, to look at the dirt, at the houses, cars, whatever's behind your horse, and you're going in a circle, you will get dizzy.
Ooh.
So the way to not get dizzy when you're lunging your horse in a circle is to focus on his head. And that's important too, because then you're going to know what the ears are interested in, where this horse's focus is. Your eyes can slowly go back towards the tail. We talked about the tail as a barometer and the letter
Hmm.
E for energy. So look at your horse. Do not look at the ground. Don't even look at your feet because you will fall over and get dizzy from being dizzy from going around and around in the circle. And don't look at the ground behind your horse. So just remember that's really important. Because you're
Wow.
going to look
Good
like
stuff.
you look like you've had 5 bourbon and cokes and you
Oh,
won't be able
wait,
to
wait,
walk
wait.
out of
That
that
would be
arena.
me. That would be me. That would be me.
Yeah.
But Christy wouldn't let me around her horses if that was true. So no drinking around horses. Actually, they do not like that, by the way. It's so weird when you look at all those Western shows when people are drinking out of their flask and things. I've never seen a horse like the smell of alcohol around them or cigarette smoke, honestly. So don't do that. I don't think they like it. I don't know animals that like it, but
Yeah,
wait,
yeah.
there's, yeah,
So get some help.
it's,
Go take a lesson. Find somebody that you can either learn with their horse or your horse,
yeah.
and take a lesson in learning because it's really beneficial. It's
And go
very
watch people do it. Go
yeah
watch them. And
yeah.
then get out there and do it with somebody at your side. I mean, yeah, get
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah,
education.
right.
Because yeah, I mean, horses just know, man. It's so great. Well, Christy, we look forward next month. We get to do the letter M. Yeah. Ooh, that's going to be fun. M for Mother Mare's Medicine. We'll find out what we're going to talk about next month. So stay tuned. We are here every second Saturday with Christy Wood, and you can keep up with her on her website, WDN Horse. Did I get it right? Did I get it
Yes,
right?
you did.
Did I?
Yes, you did.
Yeah. .com. Go get her books. Her books are awesome. Go get her books. Really, check them out. And she's got all kinds of other things on her website that you can go and purchase
And
too.
I hope my listeners try to please send me emails. Let's discuss what we have up here on the ABCs of Horses.
I love that.
Give me your
Exactly.
suggestions. I'd love to dialogue with you.
Any questions that you have, please bring them forward, and maybe we'll do a show with Q&A. That would be fantastic to hear what people want to hear and know about. So please send them in. You can go to Christy's website, WDNHorse.com, and send an email through there, and she'll answer on the show, or probably directly too, because
Yes,
she's
I will.
nice. She's cool.
Thank you,
so
everybody,
much,
for
Christy.
listening.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's ABCs of Horses featuring Christy Wood. You can keep up with Christy and learn more about her services and her books by going to her website, WDNHorse.com. Keep up with Big Blend Radio at BigBlendRadio.com.